Hi, I'm Clifford McDowell, formerly of the Tampa Bay Strong Dogs wheelchair basketball team, and you're watching the Tampa Bay Community Network.
Well, hello there, Tampa Bay, and welcome to the Tampa Bay Community Network Sports Talk. I'm your host, Coach Chuck White, and my guest is Mr. Clifford McDowell. He's played several sports through his livelihood days, and he started playing sports at 6 years old, and he played with the playground, recreation, junior high, high school, all the way through college. And now he's also a wheelchair basketball player who's played for 23 illustrious years. We're going to talk about all that throughout the show, and I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy it and you're going to learn a lot about it. So first of all, I'd like to say, Mr. McDowell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Coach. It's an honor and it's a pleasure.
Oh man, the pleasure's all mine to have unique personnel like you, guys who can scoot around in that wheelchair. And I said unique because I got in that wheelchair once trying to play against Chuck McDowell and all that. No, Chuck Porter and his group during that time at Martin Luther King Gymnasium. And man, I almost fell out that thing. Those guys put us to shame. We were out there. They didn't know how to pick and screen and do all that. We didn't know what we were doing. We were trying to find a way to keep the wheelchair going. Why don't you talk about some places, some of the things of your early childhood? I think you say you were born in Shirley, Mass. Why don't you go with that?
Okay, yes, I'm the only Yankee in my family. I was raised in the South, and my family still teases me about that. Everyone else was born in North Carolina for the most part. My mother was born in Kentucky. But Shirley is about 30 minutes outside of Boston. And my father, it's right beside the Fort Devens military base, and he had just gone back in the Army himself.
Yeah, well, Boston strikes a thing with me because my grandson, who is here from Florida A&M University. He's a former football player up there at Florida A&M, and he's down here doing his intern, and he just got back from Boston on a 5-day tour, and he said he really liked it. I said, "You welcome? Are you happy to get back to Florida?" He said, "I kind of didn't want to leave Boston." He liked all the things there, and he knew all the culture, he recognized the different culture of those people. His name is David White. He looked something like me, but he's about an inch or two taller. Okay. And I told him, don't get no funny ideas because I still got it. Well, when you came through, when you were born in Shirley, Massachusetts, you have any other brothers or sisters, I should say?
My sister is 10 years older than me, and my brother is 12 years older. So I don't know. You can do the math. I don't know that I was planned for, but I think that kind of had something to do with my father going back into the military. He was a doctor at that point, a medical doctor. And his practice was not doing well, and he needed the money, so he went back in the Army as a medical doctor.
Oh.
So my brother and sister primarily grew up in Greensboro up to that point. I was the only one really who kind of lived all over the country, much the way that military children do.
Yeah. Well, your upbringing sound pretty good there, and your sister kept you straight, I'm pretty sure. She's being the older one, yes. Talk about some of your elementary experiences, and especially how did you get into any sports, or did you get into any sports during elementary?
I wanted to start playing football.
Which elementary school you went to first?
Again, I went to several. I think the first elementary school I went to was in Fort Riley, Kansas. And I do believe I attended 4 or 5 elementary schools, and that was because my father was moving with the Army about every 18 months. But at any rate, I wanted to start playing football at age 6, and being a medical doctor, he thought that wasn't wise. And finally, I begged him, and by the time I was 6th grade, he relented and let me play basketball. So I jumped right into that right away. I loved it, and have been in love with it ever since. And went on to make my varsity team over at the junior high school when I was in 7th grade, and played varsity all 3 years, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, while I was in junior high school.
But what about football? You said you wanted to play football. He didn't want you to play football.
That's correct, yes. I wanted to play when I was in 6th grade. He still wouldn't let me play. Finally, when I was in 9th grade, I got to play. But by that point, I was so in love with basketball, I wanted to just concentrate on that. So I just played the 1 year and then concentrated on basketball after that.
And you were a walk-on junior high school. Am I correct?
I mean, everyone had to try out at that point,
Yeah.
as in high school as well.
Well, at 11 years old, you playing basketball, and you played on the playground. You played recreation basketball,
Yes.
and all those kinds of areas. Give us a little rundown on that, more specific.
Well, like anyone, I mean, that was in the late 70s, early 80s. There weren't really summer leagues back then, and a lot of organization and structure the way the kids have it now. So yeah, we played a lot of pickup basketball, and I see that the kids still play a lot of pickup basketball. So I was probably just the average basketball player trying to hone his craft. So.
Well, I bet you didn't do like we did. We had to make our basketball areas on the side of the street. We dug a little hole and put the post down there, and we chipped in and bought this and bought that, and cars would be coming. We have to stop, play a little while, and the cars would come. And then when I got to high school, well, junior high first, all we did was played outdoor basketball. Did you guys play outdoor basketball ever?
We did, especially growing up in North Carolina. Before I got to Greensboro when I was 14, there weren't a whole lot of indoor courts.
Yes.
A lot of the, every now and then I get to play in the at my junior high school's gym during the summertime. But for the most part, we played outside, much like y'all did.
Well, after junior high, you went to high school.
Correct.
And I think you told me you played basketball and tennis in high school.
Yes,
Another thing, I think it was Ben L. Smith. What high school was it? You tell me.
The actual name of the school is Ben L. Smith, but in sports we refer to the city and then the last name of the school. So in sports it was known as Greensboro Smith.
Okay. Greensboro Smith.
Yes.
And you did play basketball and tennis.
I did, yes.
You want to talk about that?
Yes, as I was saying, I was really, into the sport of basketball. And at 10th grade, my JV basketball coach was also the tennis coach. And he suggested that I try out for tennis because it would help my footwork in basketball. So I did. And eventually, by 12th grade, I was the captain of the tennis team.
Wow.
And that was a good, just backup sport, recreational sport.
All right.
And I still play tennis to this day. I play wheelchair tennis every now and then.
Okay, yes. That's wonderful, man. I started playing tennis my senior year at Don Thompson on the basketball court.
Really?
We marked the basketball court off for tennis, and we played. And we had, the walls were so close at the baseline, but we did get a form of tennis in there. And when I went to Florida A&M University, I took a class in tennis. And I had a little bit more advanced than some of those freshmen. And the lady would get me over there, sort of tutor those little other freshmen along, hit balls to their forehand and backhand and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
Let's talk about ROTC.
All right.
I understand you've been through ROTC and got commissioned.
That's correct, Coach. I went to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and I was a walk-on in basketball there, and I'd risen to my level ineptitude. You know, I mean, I was really kind of behind the curve for Division I basketball. So I was looking for something to do, and had grown up around the military. So I thought after my sophomore year, I would give the ROTC a try. And I went to their basic training camp. And within 2 days, I thought, this is. I feel like I'm at home. This is where I need to be. And the Army is a lot like being on a basketball or a football team. You know, you have to practice, you have to stay in shape, and you have to be intelligent enough to know how to run the plays.
And boy, another thing you got to do, you got to be tough to go all through that training.
Yes.
That military training, boy, was something. Crawling on your stomach and people firing bullets over your head.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And climbing the walls and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do.
I would say that my athletic training kind of gave me an edge over
Yes,
a lot of
same here.
platoon
Some of
mates.
those guys were crying and talking about even committing suicide. Some of them talking about all kind of things. But I just grinned and bared it, and I got to do it. Let's go and get it done. You went to Fort Gordon and you went to Fort Benning.
Yes, I went to Fort Benning while I was still a cadet in college,
Yes.
right before my senior year. I went there for the parachute training. It was a 3-week class or course, and I was doing it primarily to make rank, you know, within the Corps of Cadets, and of course it would also look good on my resume, you know, once I became a second lieutenant. Eventually, I was commissioned as a signal lieutenant, communications lieutenant. You know, they call it the Signal Corps, and that's how I ended up at Fort Gordon. And that's where they that was my finishing school, where they gave me all my professional training.
Fort Gordon, Georgia, right?
Fort Gordon, Georgia.
When
yes.
I was in the military, I was stationed at Fort Benning. I've been up on that high tower. I was 101st Airborne Infantry, 101st. In 82nd, when we trained in Fort Campbell, they used to call us 10 Worst. And
I was going to say that.
10 Worst. That's when the fight began.
See, that's why I didn't want to say that. Yeah, I don't want us to be fighting.
Those guys over all those 10 Worst guys, that's when the fight started. Well, anyway, your tour of duty also carried you through Desert Storm, and that was a tremendous thing to talk about.
It was. Being a military veteran, you probably know that you spend more time practicing than you actually do, playing games. You know, war is the game of the military. So I was afraid to go. I mean, that's normal, but I trusted my training. And it definitely got me through. I was over there for 6 months, and we won. So, and I came back in one piece.
Yes. Then in 1991, there was a thing happened to you called an accident, and you got hurt.
Yes.
And that's where everything started kind of going downward, but you were able to handle it.
Yes.
I'm gonna let you talk about all that.
All right. Well, and that's kind of the ironic thing, I guess, to my story, because I was in Desert Storm for 6 months, didn't get a scratch, came back to the United States, went on vacation. 2 months later, I'm back at work, and I'm returning home from work, and I blacked out at the wheel, lost control of my car, flipped the car, broke my neck instantly on impact. Now, I might add that there were no drugs or alcohol in my system. I had just finished running 4 miles.
4 miles?
Yeah.
Wow. I might have blacked out at the running 4 miles before I got to the car.
Well, and that's kind of my theory, Coach. I don't absolutely know what happened, but I think, they say that you should cool down after you exercise. I just jumped into the car. And my theory is that my blood probably just went from my head down to my feet, and I think that made me dizzy, blacked out, lost control of the car, and I was paralyzed, probably almost instantly.
Well, let's say you were hospitalized for how long? I think you told me you were in there for about 5 months or more.
That is correct. It was 5 months. It was supposed to only be 3 months, but I had some complications, and it led me there to stay there an extra 2 months. Yes, and that was a time of reflection for me. Rehab is kind of the training camp for life. For a person who has paralysis or some other disability. Took me about a week, I mean, literally, to get past the idea of paralysis and how it would change my life. And I attacked my rehabilitation much the way that I went after basketball or trying to become a second lieutenant in the Army. I went after it with gusto. And it paid off.
So it took you a week just to overcome the idea of being injured. And you told me that you were in charge of several guys and you would always tell them, don't have pity parties because of certain things. And then look at you, you about to let yourself down. So you say, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstrap and stick that chest out and show them that you can overcome it.
That is true, Coach. I mean, what happened, I had a female soldier while I was in Desert Storm, and her boyfriend was draining the bank account back home. Had a male soldier. His wife was cheating on him back home. And in each of those cases, as their leader, I had to let them know what was going on. I knew before they knew. And I had to, be human and, appeal to their humanity and understand that, yes, that does hurt. But as well, the military or the Army talks about something called military bearing. And that's just basically professionalism and being able to perform under all circumstances, being able to put your personal aside. And that was what I had to encourage them to do. And both of those young people performed admirably. So there I was, I think 3 or 4 months later after this occurred, laying in a hospital bed. And they came to my mind. And I thought, now, what kind of leader would I be? What kind of person would I be to say to them, you need to pull through this and be strong. And yet here I am. I'm going to sit here and feel sorry for myself for the rest of my life. No. So like I said, after about a week, I said, no, I've got to do this for myself, but at the very least, I have to do it for them. So I'm not a hypocrite. So.
Well, that's really great to know that you did realize that there were injuries to their hearts and pains, and you've been through some injuries, and you won't be the same like they wouldn't be, but you had to show some signs of upbuilding, and you couldn't let yourself down. So that sort of helped you by being in charge to show them how to act.
Correct.
Well, we're getting to the point now that I know people have heard me introduce you as a wheelchair basketball player, and I think they want to hear something about that. So why don't we start with the wheelchair basketball? First of all, you said something about you were asked to come out. How did you get involved with it? You were asked to come out by somebody.
After I got out of rehab, the little bit that I knew about wheelchair basketball and wheelchair sports, I didn't think it would be very challenging to me, having been a standing athlete before that. So I pretty much made up my mind, I'm not going to pursue this. I didn't even think about it, looking forward or any of that. But I still had a friend, and he was playing in a recreational league, a standing friend. So I went to watch his game as kind of a fan and cheerleader. And the scoreboard operator at the game was a wheelchair user.
Okay.
And I didn't know that, but he saw me, in the crowd there. And so at some point, he got my attention. We met up, and he said, "Look, this is what I'm involved with, wheelchair basketball. We meet at this gym at this time. why don't you come check us out and see what it's about?
Oh, okay.
And at that point, I was kind of looking for something to do.
Right.
So I said, okay, I'll go out there. I was so wrong about the level of competition. The first time I played, I literally just kind of ran in a circle at half court.
You usually are asked to do a thing, or you are motivated by some friend or whatever, and you were looking for something to do, and he asked you to come out. You didn't think it would be as exciting as it was, but then, as you say, you were wrong, and you found it was exciting. So you did stay with that wheelchair for, oh gosh, you said how many years? 30-something?
Since 1992, so 23 years. Basketball's always been kind of a way of life for me. I mean, being active is good for anyone, for human beings. So just the process a lot of times of just just doing cardiovascular work and strength training. It makes me feel better, but with a disability, it makes life easier to live. And that's a lot of the thing that I try to pass on to people who are outside of the sport, haven't been introduced to the sport, and sometimes as well to standing people, so they can see what it does. I mean, the competition is great, and that builds kind of self-reliance and independence, but as well it builds bodies.
So it was a good thing that you did go out. Talk about the coach, the players, or some of the fans, et cetera. Talk about those things that you were involved with. Who was the coach? Who were some of the players? Or how did they react to you, or you react with them?
The team that I had played with here, the Tampa Bay Strong Dogs, are affiliated with, to an extent, the Hillsborough County Parks and Recreation. I believe that the county provides the gym space, for them to pursue their activity. And they have a dedicated coach. I think at present they may have about 10 or 12 players on the team. And they belong to the National Wheelchair Basketball Association, which is a kind of a loose affiliation of approximately 80 teams across the country.
80 teams.
Yes, which seems like a lot, but they're probably, I think there's something like 23 or 2,400 wheelchair basketball players.
Okay.
Every year there's probably about 1 million high school basketball players. So the challenge for me as a basketball junkie is finding a competitive game to play against or play with wheelchair basketball players. And it's always been like that since I've been paralyzed. So you usually end up with 10 or so people in each city, and then you have to go over to the next city to find some competition to play. So you take your team, and that's what you do.
Every team that I know I've been on, they usually have team rules or team regulations that you have to adhere to. Is that the case with wheelchair basketball, the team, the Tampa Bay Strong Dogs? Did they have any rules or regulations? You had to be in a certain time, or this, that, the other, you had to do this? Talk about it.
Oh, definitely. Well, as I said, the affiliation of all the teams is kind of loose, so teams kind of run or have a personality of their own. The Tampa team definitely had rules and regulations, and to a large extent, it's expected that you will be at least 2 of the 3 practices each week. There's a third practice that was optional. But I have heard of teams that are not able to practice at all, or only once a week, or they may only actually come together as a team at game time. And some teams are all right with that, and others have mandatory attendance and practice and training, and it really depends on the individual teams.
What about your team records? What about some of the honors awards? Or do they have anything like most valuable player, outstanding player?
As I was saying, it's kind of loosely based. I mean, even though you have the 80 teams, it kind of resembles, the barnstorming of the 1920s and 1930s, kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters used to make their living. And you put together tournaments, weekend tournaments, about once a month or so, as you're able to, get the money and have, the teams, come to one place to play. And typically, you'll play about 3 games in a day, about 4 or 5, maybe as many as 6 games in a weekend. And ordinarily, not always, but sometimes a most valuable player is named out of an event like that. As the teams go to the more organized national tournament, trying to become the national champion, there is definitely a player of the tournament and the all-tournament team. So some of the same accolades that you find in standing basketball, you'll find in wheelchair basketball.
Okay, how do you look at things today because of your experiences that you've had throughout the many years prior to now? And do you root for any favorite team, players, etc.?
Well, I would say definitely my experience in wheelchair basketball, as I was saying to you before, it definitely builds an individual up, and it has given me the confidence to drive on with my life, and I guess pursue a lot of the normal things that people do. At one point, I worked a full-time job in Washington, D.C. Even though I am retired from the Army, I just wanted something to do. Eventually, I found a woman that I loved, and I married her. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. We're divorced now, but she's a wonderful person. And I've done a number of just normal things that people might not ordinarily associate with someone that has a disability. But to the other part of that question, I grew up a fan of the Washington NFL team, and I was a Philadelphia 76er fan growing up.
Oh, boy. Was that Wilt Chamberlain then, Dr. J or somebody?
Wilt Chamberlain was a little before me. I just turned 50. Dr. J was more my era. As a matter of fact, that was why I liked the team so much. But we didn't have a professional team of any sort in North Carolina at that point, except for minor league baseball. So I picked those 2 teams. But as I went along, as I got older, I mean, I probably by the time I was about 35, 40, I started just kind of liking good games and particular players. I mean, it's something for me to watch someone like Tim Duncan, because he's such a professional and handles himself so well and works hard at his craft. Yes, they're a fantastic team. I love the team concept when I'm watching professional basketball. So.
How about Dr. J?
He was incredible. I actually got to see him in 1980. 1980, he came to the Greensboro Coliseum when I was 15, and scraped together my allowance, and I got to go see Dr. J, and that was a memory for a lifetime. He was an incredible player.
Well, we certainly appreciate having you here on the show and enlightening our many listeners about your wheelchair basketball and your life and how you got involved with such. So we look forward to seeing you throughout our days forthcoming, and maybe we can get you back here again.
Oh, super, Coach. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for being here. I'm sure our listeners and viewers got much from that.
Good.
So that's it for the Tampa Bay Community Network Sports Talk. We certainly hope you've enjoyed this show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. So be with us again on our next show right here on the Tampa Bay Community Network Sports Talk.